see all these shining faces of teachers who are struggling through this time together apart. So I'm quite honored to be here talking to you today, and I hope we can really make this into some kind of conversation that we really create something together and have a good time in the process, because Lord knows we all need it right now. You know, I also have to just start by saying that, you know, we all know we're kind of all in this weird situation together. There's a lot going on in so many people's lives right now, and you all are the ones who are also responsible for not just yourselves and your own families, but also for groups of young people who are also struggling and vulnerable during this time, and who are, you know, ambitious and full of dreams and wanting to learn and relate, and all of that is so disrupted right now. And so there's a huge burden on your shoulders, and I'm hoping, I mean, of course, no one really knows like what's the great advice to give in this situation. We've never been in this situation before. So I can't walk in and pretend like I'm an expert. I have lots of experience dealing with teachers in pandemics, right? But what I can do, I thought, is just kind of take you through some of the basic neuroscience around how emotion happens, how the brain develops, the very central role of social relationships and emotional experiences and meaning making in the way that people grow and develop and feel and think, so that we can, you know, maybe have a conversation together, and you can break out with colleagues along the way. I'll give you opportunities to stop and sort of chat it up and figure out what this means to you. Come back and ask me questions, and we can start to think together about what you need and create a conversation together. So that's sort of the idea here. Can you all see my slides? Just give me little thumbs ups or something. Yeah, okay, you can see my slides. So you have the grave honor of being the first ones whom I've talked with about this topic at such a broad scale. You'll probably can imagine that there's been a zillion requests for media interviews and podcasts and all kinds of people trying to make sense out of this stuff with scientists and with teachers. And I've been very involved with that, but this is the first like talk to 80 teachers where I'm like, okay, step up and say what people should be doing, and how the heck can I know what you should be doing, right? So, but we'll think together, and I'll help you maybe get some new insights into what you're experiencing, what your children and your students are experiencing, and what might be some strategies you could think about trying. And the basic way that I've been thinking about this problem, I've been thinking a whole lot about, you know, how can I be helpful during this pandemic? How can I be of service to teachers? What kinds of insights can I provide? And I think we need to think, like I said in the little paragraph that I sent you, we really need to think about this as an opportunity. Whenever there's a major disruption in the status quo, in the usual institutions, in the usual way in which we do things, that's both extremely difficult and stressful, and also potentially an opportunity for innovation, for growth, and for re-examining some of the basic fundamental premises of why we do what we do. And I think one of the best ways that we can manage this situation, because this is not the last time that we're going to have a major world disruption. You know, I don't even want to bring it up, but like, what happens when the internet goes down next time, right? I mean, there's just, we're so reliant on our tools, and we're so reliant on our routines and our structures and our institutions, which is as it should be. But it's actually useful sometimes and makes you feel kind of agentic and empowered potentially to step back and think for a minute about, well, what are we actually trying to achieve here? What is school actually for? Why is it that we come together in these spaces? And what are young people working on? What are teachers working on? What's the basic humanity that undergirds the ways in which we interact with each other? And how might we foster that in new ways given the situation? And how might we also think together about how some of the new ways that we come up with under this really difficult situation may actually lead to innovations in educational practice and policy and in learning in the future, when we are able to go back to schools in person together and other kinds of activities. So that's where I'm kind of starting from. I don't know how many of you have seen me speak before. I know I spoke to this organization before. So you're going to recognize some of the basics, because I didn't want to, you know, reinvent a whole bunch of new information and in-depth geeked out stuff on the brain, which I love so much. But I feel like, you know, maybe we should start at the beginning over again and kind of revisit the basics, and then we can dive into what it means now. And so Let me see, there we go. So you may remember this painting that I really like to start out this conversation, and I think it's even more sort of appropriate now than it is even in person and in the pre-COVID era. It's a painting done by my colleague Margaret Lazari at USC. It's a huge 6 by 8 foot watercolor that's like vibrant, and in the middle are these white squiggles that are kind of floating in this seascape of life, and those white squiggles, this kind of semi-transparent sort of shapes that are sort of half there and half not there, are actually images taken from someone's brain, right? Where someone got in the scanner, we took pictures of their brain, we peeled off the outside of the picture all the little neurons that do the firing, right? And I always make sure people know I peel them off the picture, not off the person, right? And then took all that white matter that's underneath, which is basically the billions of little interconnected, microscopic, fragile little threads of salt water, little tubes of salt water that are dissipating the signals of electrical and chemical nature across the entire space of the head and all the way down into the body, into your feet and your hands, right? That make an entire network, literally a net, that catches your sensations from the outside world, your sensations from your inside world, and then funnels them together into these incredibly dynamic, complex networks of communication, of information inside your head. And all of that space of body and brain and world, inside world and outside world, comes together as you're experiencing the act of living. And what we've learned from neuroscientists unequivocally over the past several decades is the very, very inherently social nature of that process. So, we tend in psychology or in thinking about science to think about the unit of analysis as the individual. When we're teachers, we want to know what a kid can do, right? Not what a kid can do with a whole bunch of other kids helping and them all talking and working together. We tend in this cultural context, but not in all cultural contexts, right? But in this one, in Western schools, we think about what a person can do on their own. And yet, that is so fundamentally foreign to the way our biology actually sets us up to learn. And human beings, if we have one strength that is remarkable, that other species do not have to nearly the degree we have, although they have it to a degree also, it's our ability to learn from one another. It's our ability to be deeply culturally situated in spaces and mindsets and belief systems and sets of expectations and routines that we co-construct together and that we continually reconstruct together over time through these dynamic cycles of interrelating and behaving and thinking and working and facing problems and solving problems and moving forward. And all of that interrelatedness that we co-create as this space to think in and to live in, really in an embodied sense, but also in a mental sense, and in a kind of moral and ethical sense, all of that space is co-created by our interrelationships. There's a lovely saying that supposedly comes from Zulus in South Africa that is something like, I am because you are, right? And I love that because it really undergirds and stresses the degree to which our own ability to have a sense of self and to feel purposeful and alive and well and like we matter and like we're real and like what we do is important, that sense is not constructed in a vacuum. It's constructed in the space of cultural learning and relationships. And because of that, when we have this highly sort of, from a cultural standpoint, highly unnatural, forced social isolation, right? What we experience as human beings is a kind of extra added stress in the sense that we are no longer able to co-regulate each other socially so directly, which is a fundamental way in which we promote well-being. Any parent knows this extremely well, right? Especially with little children, it's really obvious, but really all the way up, even with adult children, right? We are co-regulating ourselves and our friends and our children's and our parents' well-being by sort of physiologically, culturally, and socially and emotionally engaging with them in the co-construction of conversations, of relationships, of activities together, and of spaces and rituals together. And as we do that, we are actually instantiating our own selves, both biologically and culturally, right? And what I mean by that is that you literally can't grow yourself as a child in the absence of relationships. I mean, you've heard me probably talk about the really heartbreaking examples of institutionally raised children in Romania, for example, who you know, have all the things they need to be able to grow. They have food, they have buildings, they have beds, and they have, you know, stuff that they need like diapers. But they had, until these policies have been ended now because of this science, but they had like a rotating staff of caregivers every 8 hours. And what we found in studying those people, this is Chuck Nelson and Nathan Fox and his colleagues, is that those kids don't just grow up to be like sort of self-centered or kind of cognitively delayed or emotionally dysregulated or socially awkward. They, you know, what you get in that kind of situation is 17-year-old kids who are 3 feet tall and weigh 65 pounds, right? Our bodies and our brains do not know how to grow in the absence of social relationships and cultural learning. That is the legacy of our intelligence and our species. You know, it's not like evolution has specified you need a gene for calculus and a gene for writing novels and a gene for doing poetry and a gene for painting, right? If that were the case, how could you possibly ever fit all the information that could ever be invented into the past, you know, brain so that you could inherit it? It just doesn't make sense that that could happen. How did we get to be so amazingly creative and so amazingly culturally interdependent? And those two things are really two sides of the same coin, right? That is the nature of our species, biology, and our minds, is that what it looks like has happened is that over evolution, we've lost genetic control, right? Our genes actually don't specify what we need to develop into all the way anymore. Instead, they sort of set us up with a bunch of contingency plans saying, if the world's like this, grow yourself like that. But if you come into a situation that feels like this, right, and the feeling part's really important, then you grow yourself like that, right? And so how you think and how you relate and the way that you feel inside your own self as a person turns out to be fundamental to the way in which our brains grow and develop. And this is not just metaphor, this is actually literally true. And so given all that background, what does that mean for the way we're going to feel and interrelate and learn now? I can tell you one thing, kids are learning now, right? The question is what, not whether, right? What are they learning now? They're not just learning, right, the things that you give them and less schoolwork or more schoolwork, right? They're learning about how the world is, what kind of reality we're in, how it feels like to be you. They're learning about what it means to be compassionate, to engage, what it means to be sort of out of control and to not understand, right? These are all the dimensions of what not just they, but we are also learning. There's no adult alive who's ever experienced anything like this either. And because of that huge shifting sands under our feet, it's very, very difficult to do what I would call making meaning. It's very difficult for us to stop and sort of make a story out of what's going on, a satisfying story that puts us in it, not just about what's going to happen and what is going on out here, but a story that deeply situates me and my agency and my sense of self in a world of action and happenings and goings on. That's very difficult to do right now. And yet, human beings thrive on that and only that. That is what grows us, because in engaging with storytelling, with building meaning around not just what we know, but why and how we know it and what it's for and who we are because we're capable of thinking about these things. That sense of self that we bring to the world, which is so inherently socially contextualized, is what makes us well. And yet it's been so shifted out from under our feet right now that it feels like you can't get your sea legs, right? You don't know what it all means. You don't know who you are. You know, in the sense of like, who am I in the world? What can I do to try to make the world a better place? I want to help. I feel terrible for the things that are going on that are bad. I feel really like I could help, but I'm powerless to know what to do because it's very, very difficult to construct meaning out of what all this is. What is actually going on and why on so many levels. It's not just about, you know, health problems and viruses. It's also about the inequalities in society that are being exposed like never before, right? We've always known they were there, but now they're blatant, right? It's about the political rifts that come from when people feel afraid. When you're afraid, what do? You hunker down and you stick with people who are like yourself, and you push yourself away from people who are not like yourself. Add to that the added stress that you can't actually physically be with people like you or people not like you. And how do you resolve any of this into some kind of a coherent story or experience? It makes it very, very difficult. And what happens is we become anxious and stressed. And as you become anxious and stressed, it changes the way you think, not just how you feel, but the way you think. It makes you much more immediate need, much more here and now, much more like feed me information, and much less like let me engage and be sort of socially, you know, connected to other people. It makes it much harder to be all the ways that we know are really healthy for people. So that's kind of the backdrop. Does that feel like anything that feels real to you guys? I mean, is that like what you're experiencing at all? Like, it's not so much that for us, mostly our lives are terrible in the direct physical sense. Most of you are probably well enough, right? You're physically well, you're not ill, and you're not, you know, you have enough food and you have a place to live, but you feel disconnected from your own story. It's like, I can't quite build something together with the people that I normally build myself around. So I saw a lot of nodding heads. I'm going to go ahead a little bit. And just sort of say, well, you know, that's how our kids are feeling too, right? And they have less experience than we do, being able to make meaning of strange situations. They have less perspective taking ability than we do. They have less, you know, sort of checks and balances on their capabilities to simulate possible alternative futures. They don't know even as much as we know about the complexities of this situation. And what does that mean for them? It means that we have a bunch of kids right now who are both very needy and very far from the supports that can help them in this need. And that puts a huge strain on you as the teachers, right? And so I want us to think over the rest of this time period about how we can start to mitigate that strain. And I think that what we need to really think about here is creative, innovative ways to support the big picture ideas of education. Why do we come together? What counts as effective learning? What counts as learning? And this is a huge one, I think. What counts as learning that supports a person's development? Not just what they know or what they can do, but who they are as a person. And I think when you shift the narrative that way, it maybe can give us some new ideas for how we can get through this together and potentially even innovate in the process. So how about if we stop here for a 5-minute breakouts to just sort of get your heads on together around the way I'm talking about this. Maybe think with a couple of colleagues about, you know, whether this rings true to you, what you're experiencing right now, what are the biggest questions you have, issues you have, what are you struggling with trying to understand? And then we'll come back together and I'll take you through some of the neural mechanisms that mediate this shift from engaging socially to either ruminating or making meaning internally, and how when the balance of those two ways of engaging with the world, both, you know, sort of looking out, I've called it in the past, engaging with other people, being social, noticing the things around you, interacting, solving problems, being task-oriented, right? And then shifting inward into a kind of reflective space where you sort of chew on things and make memories and construct stories and make meaning and figure out what you believe about things and what you think is right and wrong. How the shift of our circumstances has so strained, right, the ability to shift that seesaw back and forth, to engage and to make meaning. And then as we go through there, I think we can come to looking to some kids' work, the way kids are talking about problems, and maybe get some insights into what kinds of work you may be able to engage with your own students around that would help you and them feel better and learn and develop in the process, right? Really actually grow yourselves as people through this very difficult and challenging time. So let's break out for a couple of minutes and just, just 5 minutes in groups to kind of share and pair up, or however you want to do it, and just, have a little moment for that social time that you normally don't get to have right now, right?
Hi, Kathy.
How are you?
We got disconnected when we went to the breakouts.
Oh no, I will find Aaron. I'm not the host, and so I can't put you. Oh wait, I can. Ooh, let's see if I can put you in.
So I just joined a room.
Yeah, let me have you. No, it's just for me. Let me find Aaron and then have her put you, and there's another person back in a breakout room.
All right, thanks.
Good to see you.
You too.
Okay. Aaron, can you put Steve and Michelle back into breakout rooms?
Yeah.
They got booted out.
Okay. Steve, I don't know. This is always what I struggle with, Kathy.
Same.
Like once they've been assigned, but they get booted out or leave, how do you get them back in there?
I just put them in a random one, and it might be a different one, but I'll look at the numbers and see which breakout rooms are smaller.
Like you move, because both of them were in one.
Mm-hmm.
Did you just find their name and move them?
Yeah, so they should be at the top at unassigned,
They're
and
not
then
because they're assigned. They were in one.
oh, okay.
It happens in other things too.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had this in other workshops. It's when people are in a room and then they leave
That-
for whatever
mhm.
reason, their fault, not their fault.
It could have been my fault for sure.
No, sometimes sometimes your tech glitches and then you get booted out. Yeah, I have a lot of problems with breakout rooms too, especially when I pre-assign them, and then for some reason people aren't in the room that I pre-assigned, so then I have to scramble a bit. Let's see. Do you want to give me hosting duty or?
Well, time is now up. They're going to be coming back.
Okay.
So
So Steve, thanks for being.
thanks for your patience, Steve.
Oh,
Hopefully next round it'll work better.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. To fix this light.
Okay, you let me know when I should start because I can't tell if everybody's back or not.
Yeah, we're close. I think everyone's just coming in now.
Okay.
And yes, I think we're good, Mary Helen.
Okay, great. So I should have said before at the beginning too, like I would feel so much more confident, like I know you would too, right? Facilitating a session like this one, if we could all sit down together in my living room and be like, wow, what are you feeling like? Yeah, me too, right? And like actually engaging. And so it's super hard to be like, hey, I'm standing here in my home office, lecturing at you in your home office or where your couch or wherever you are, right? And then pretending to know how you feel like. So I'm trying to read your faces. So keep your cameras on, all right? I'm doing my best. So
Mary Helen,
yeah.
Mary Helen, I just want to let you know your screen is no longer sharing.
Oh, my screen's not sharing. Oh, okay, hold on, everybody. Okay, I've prepared for all contingencies. Hold on a second. Screen 2, but what I really want to do is advanced portion of screen. Share. Okay, hold on. Ah, there. Now is it? All right, great.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here's what I thought we could do, because I think there's kind of two big things we want to do, right? And you can all just kind of nod a lot, and then I'll know, or be like, okay. The first one is, I think people would like to kind of talk a little bit about learning. Like, let's just get back to basics. What does it mean to do really work that helps a person learn, that really makes them feel well and productive and agentic? Because no matter what you might think, having teenagers at home, people actually love to feel like they're productive and like what they're doing really matters to the world. There's nothing more healing or motivating than feeling like your life has a purpose and like the work that you're doing is actually important for yourself, for your future, and for those around you. So that's my first strategy that I'm going to try to connect to. As I'm just pulling these out of my experience and knowing how the brain works, right? But the first strategy is, how can we start to design new kinds of schoolwork and activities that make the kids and you feel like you're actually contributing to the world in a meaningful way and learning ideas that are powerful. I had sent around a little Ed Leadership article that we just published this month. You know, it feels so quaint now. It's so pre-COVID, like it doesn't even mention any of this. But the ideas, I think, are very relevant. And the big picture there was, it's how people think about what they're learning and doing that determines whether it feels like something meaningful, like they're motivated, like they're excited about it, like they want to dig in on it. And if people feel like they're just sort of reacting or being given stuff and they're out of control, that contributes to anxiety and to, dismotivation. So normally in schools, we already have issues with that. But now we really, really have issues with that because your social media is like 2 seconds away from you all the time and you can pick it up, right? So what does this mean? Let's look a little bit. And I've shown these things before for some of you who've heard me speak before, but let's look a little bit at kids' work, like little kids' work to start, because it's so cute. And it makes you remember like what really matters, right? This is a song that my daughter wrote when she was 6 in kindergarten for my son, whose name is Theodore. She calls him Teddy, right? And I won't sing it for you, but I'll just read it to you. It says, unless you're a kindergarten teacher, then you can read for yourself. But it says, "Oh Teddy, we love you more than the whole earth size. As the earth spins every day, we love you as much as usual. But sometimes even more, as you make us proud and happy that you're you." So sweet, right? Like so adorable. But I just have a simple question for you about this. Like there's so many things you could talk about here, right? You see my little girl, she's like feels compelled to like share her feelings with her baby brother. She's got her little music stand on there. She's got her little dress and shoes all dressed up in pretty pink, which, she didn't even wear pink. She didn't like it, but that's beside the point. Like that's what little girls do, right? And, you can think about this poem in many ways. In some ways you can think, well, is this a poem about this little girl's love for her baby brother? Or is this a song about, or a poem about her budding interest in planetary science, right? She's taking her own experience of the world, which is inherently social, and trying to make sense of the world around her. And when she learns about the sun and the earth going around in circles and day and night cycles and and watching the sun go overhead and all this immense, big, gigantic ball of dirt we're on, and she's trying to get her head around how weird that is, how amazing that is, like what is that? How does she do that? She does it by, in her own mind, making a connection to something that makes her feel the same way, which in her little space at that time was her love for her baby little brother, right? She feels to her baby brother like she's just overwhelmed with emotion. She's so proud for him. She's so happy for him and who he is, right? We love you. And then she's like, that's just how I feel when I think about the world. The world is huge. It's a gigantic ball of dirt. It's so amazing. I can't get my head around why it's so gigantic or whether it's really real, but it sure seems real because I'm here, right? And she made this connection in her mind, which was so powerful to her that she was willing to spend who knows how long as a little teeny 6-year-old writing out this poem, right? And drawing the picture and making something out of it. And that feels good, right? That feels good. We don't tend to think of this kind of work as being the kind of work that schools directly promote. Maybe they do with little kids, but maybe not so much with big kids. I would argue that one of the realizations we need to take away from this COVID pandemic is that this is how all people love to learn. It becomes more and more abstract and high level and complex, right? Read the article I sent. There's a kid in there, and you can go watch that kid on the video at the bottom. There's a link at the bottom of the article to all the videos of these kids in New York City explaining their math projects. Math projects. I mean, I'm sorry, math teachers, right? I love math. But, these are kids who had never learned math before or who were failing, literally failed out of traditional public schools and then are in these other public schools for failure kids. And here they are being like, let me tell you about my math project, right? Why? Because the teachers figured out a way to make those kids feel like they owned it, like it was their interesting math project that actually matters for the world. That's the trick. How do we do that? How do we do that? I think we do that, first of all, by not trying to do all the work ourselves as the teacher. Your kids bring all kinds of interests, situations, ideas with them to your room, or in this case, to your Zoom, right? If you can find ways to help them connect those ideas and leverage their own interests and their own ideas about how they could help somebody in their community, some small thing, depending on what their age is, right? If there's something they could contribute, can they sew masks? Can they make pretty cards for patients in the hospital if they're little kids? Is there something they could do that would help people around them deal with this crisis, because if they think of something and they take it on, and then you can slide in, it's like putting the vegetables in the chocolate cake, you know? You can slide in, well, you're gonna need to figure out how many of these you need. Guess we better do some math, right? Or whatever it is, right? And then if you can help kids come up with these projects, those projects will sustain them like no other schoolwork you can imagine. They become motivated, they become really like on fire, especially if it's for real. It's not just a joke, but they're actually sewing masks and dropping them off at the, you know, local hospital or something like that, or whatever it is they're doing, right, to help. When kids are engaged in that way, it's incredibly helpful. Another idea I've had, and I want to just throw it out there to you, I talked, it's now being shared with, you know, Superintendent Buettner and other people. City Year are thinking of doing it too. I just talked to them about it yesterday. I don't know if it's going to happen, but here it is. Why are we putting all the burden for delivering all the content and the teaching onto you, the teachers, right? We've got an army of kids who know things, right? Who need opportunities to review, and there's nothing more empowering and helpful and agentic than teaching. Why don't we find ways to leverage some of the older kids teaching and reviewing things with the younger kids over Zoom or whatever kinds of platforms are possible and safe at this time? Is it possible for you as teachers to pair yourselves up into some kind of networked groups where you say, I've got third graders who are learning how to write paragraphs. Well, I've got 10th graders who are supposed to be writing 5-paragraph essays. Okay, we're going to work on our essays and share those with the seniors who are going to give feedback on each other's and tutor them. But then an hour every day, our 10th graders are going to Zoom with a group of your third graders, right? And the teacher says, hey, here's what Laura's working on. Here's what Samuel's working on. Here's what Jose's working on. And then they get on, and maybe these kids can actually tutor each other. What could be more empowering to the kid than actually being able to genuinely relieve some of the stress during this burden and really actually do work that matters to another human being, right? My own daughter, for example, is you know, 18. She's missing her high school graduation. She's done, I mean, it's the whole, you know, the whole thing. And now we're worried she can't go to college in the fall. We'll see what happens, right? And she's been so bummed. She's really into yoga. So for her, she thought, well, what could I do? Maybe I can, she's a certified yoga teacher. Maybe I can teach yoga. So every single day, every weekday for this whole entire school closure for 7 or 8 weeks now, she's teaching a half-an-hour yoga class on Zoom for free from 2:30 to 3. Anybody can join. Teachers, students, sometimes there's only one person, sometimes there's a big group of people from across the country, sometimes a lot of people just from here, right? Her friends, and it's always there for people, and that's what she can contribute. And even when it gets to be a burden, it makes her feel like I'm actually doing something to make people feel better, and I'm using my own talents. And in doing so, I can assure you she has learned to be a much better yoga teacher and much better at other things that are actually not directly related to yoga. Like, how do you manage time? How do you explain things to people in a way that make them feel good? How do you actually talk somebody through a really complex sequence of stuff when it's really difficult for them to see you, right? She's learning all kinds of skills in her own mind that in turn, and also social leadership and emotional regulation skills, right? That she wouldn't have otherwise had. So what I'm saying here is, see if you can think outside the box a little bit, right? Just taking your regular classes that you would normally do in person and trying to kludge together a way to do it through a different medium like Zoom is, you know, will get you so far, but that is a horrible burden on you because it doesn't work very well. In some cases, it might be okay, but in some cases, it's really difficult, especially with young kids, right? But if we can sort of think outside the box, we may be providing benefits, not just for our students, but for ourselves and for older kids, for example, who are helping the younger ones do things and who are responsible for kids, maybe producing reports and helping them think about stuff, or doing reports together. A big kid organizes a group of little kids to, you know, younger kids to, and then helps them do something and produce some kind of report or some kind of service for the community, and then they share it together with one kid leading the other kids. Things like that take the burden off you and keep kids really engaged in school. And they learn all kinds of things along the way. And then as you're watching them, you can figure out more things to work in, you know, like let's learn the history of this, or let's think about, well, you know, what kind of masks actually filter viruses. And why? How big are viruses? What do they look like? Okay, you guys go off and figure that out. Come back tomorrow and do us a Zoom report on it. Teach us about it. Send us some stuff to read about it, right? And the more you follow the kids' interests and actually go on the fly a little bit in this active way, what you're teaching kids is when, you know, life throws you lemonade or lemons, make lemonade, right? Use your resources to give back. Don't wait for the situation to be fixed so you can go back to how things were before. Like, teacher, give me stuff. I need things to do to be able to help, right? Instead, the moment you realize there's a hardship, you dig in and you look for a chance that you could actually give back. And like, you're teaching kids a huge amount that way, a huge amount. And then you become the facilitator. It's still super hard work for you, right? But you become the facilitator rather than the sole deliverer of content in this really awkward Zoom space that we know is keeping everybody's eyes on screens for too long every day and all that. What do you think? I mean, you know, give it a whirl. Yeah, give it a whirl. See what we can figure out. See what we can figure out together. Okay, I'm gonna take you down here a little bit into the brain now. Does that sound good? All right, so you may have seen this slide before. Emotions are automatic. And boy, do we know that in these times, right? You realize, like one of my best friends, I went for a walk with her last night, socially distanced and all that with our masks on and 6 feet apart and outdoors and, you know, whatever, don't worry about us. But, you know, I went for a walk with her. I hadn't been able to see her in quite a while because of all the lockdowns. And, you know, she had her first panic attack yesterday. She's never had a panic attack before. She's like the most not panicable person ever. And she freaked out. And first she's thinking, do I have COVID? I can't breathe, right? And then she's like, no, I'm just freaking out, you know? And we're learning how to feel. Even the adults are learning, oh, no, I'm freaking out. I'm freaking out because people I care about's businesses are going under in her case, right? And she's part of the town, you know, council that tries to help with that. And she'd been listening to all these terrible, sad stories about people's businesses going under all day. And she just freaked out without realizing. She thought she was ill, right? And then she had to reinterpret it and be like, oh no, this is actually me having an anxiety attack. Okay, I need to deal with this, right? And so this becomes incredibly important as a process, incredibly important. Like, take a screenshot, think about it, right? Emotions are automatic. The stuff that happens makes us nervous, it makes us anxious. But the way in which we feel that emotion determines how it changes our thinking and our behavior into the future, right? When we're in this reactive freak out mode, then what happens is our thinking gets very shallow. And this also speaks, like, here's the big, like, theoretical picture. This also speaks to the interconnection between emotion and cognition, right? Emotions aren't things that influence cognition, and they're the same thing as cognition. The way we feel is determined by the way we think, and the way we think changes how we feel. And it's all one big hodgepodge together, okay? So that's one little thing to just note. And in the brain, it's totally intertwined, okay? But what we're paying attention to in today's world, right now, makes us nervous. And when that happens, we clam up, we withdraw, we shut down. We're like rats who like freeze and fight, right? That's what we do. We're mammals. And yet, what we need to do is learn how to feel this emotion in a different way. Learn how to feel that anxiety, not in a way that makes you want to run and hide and isolate yourselves from people who think differently than you, and you know, and hunker down, but instead in a way that you keep yourself physically safe, right? You do need to be socially distanced in terms of the physical sense of physically socially distanced, but we can learn how to feel that emotion as a call to action, as a call to innovate, as a call to re-engage in new ways. It takes so much more effort to be socially engaged and compassionate and aware and helping and putting in and productive and learning during this time, because it's not in person, and our biology is such that we thrive off of in person. Even the pheromonal like aspects of chemically being together, we co-regulate each other's physiology, and just being in the room with someone who's excited makes you more excited. And that's really hard to generate all that yourself. That's a burden to have to manufacture all that social, cultural situatedness when nobody else can be around you physically. But if we can learn how to feel these emotions as a call to action, as a challenge, as a need to re-engage and to help one another and to be engaged with one another, then it makes you, this is the magic like secret. It flips back around on you and makes you feel good. You go to bed that night thinking, I got something done today. I helped somebody today. I learned something today. I accomplished something today. And this period of time is actually in some ways a lovely gift, because our kids in our classes actually could have the leeway and the opportunity to engage in deep interest-driven projects that they normally wouldn't be able to do because there's so much content they need to get to and so many other things they need to be spending their time on. If you can help them find projects that they're really interested in, and it almost doesn't matter that much what, but rich projects that have a lot to explore, you know, then they can start to really get into something, and then they get passionate about it. And becoming passionate is the antidote to anxiety, because, and I can show you this in the brain in a minute, it turns down that like watch out response and turns up that like explore, engage, I'm really me, I'm really here, and I've got what it takes to make stuff happen response. And that's what we really all need. So are there any, do we want to stop? Do we want to back off for a minute and talk for a couple minutes about this? Like, think if you can see of any ideas or build any connections with other teachers and other classes who are struggling. I mean, we don't have time to do it in full now, but you could launch something like, hey, I've got second graders who are working on, you know, whatever it is in math. Do you have ninth graders who could use a review of that, right? And who could teach it? You know, that kind of thing. Or are there people who are working on projects around, you know, older kids can do really, really complex projects. My 15-year-old is working with a group of kids from around the world, all on Zoom. He wouldn't have met otherwise, right? Through the New York Academy of Sciences. It's all free. Any kid can get on there and be part of it. And then they're working to design a new kind of respirator machine, right? Where kids in India and Egypt are working all together. What could you think of for your kids that you might be able to start, you know, actually looking out into the world and using the tools we do have now available to start rethinking what it would mean to be a real developing learner right now, a person who feels like they're making the world a better place rather than one who's waiting for it to end. So do you want to break out for a couple minutes? Do people want to, or you want me to keep talking? I know it's really hard to stare at screens this long.
Mary Helen, I wonder if this would be a good time to see if anyone has a couple questions.
Sure, if you can do questions, that's even better. Yeah.
Sure. So just to remind everyone, I know you're all Zoom experts at this point, but if you go down to the bottom, the participants tab, you can raise your hand and then we can see your hand come up. Because there are so many of you, if you just physically raise your hand, I might not be able to see you. So feel free to use that raise hand feature of Zoom to ask a question. And I'll call you and unmute you. Okay, so we have Lisa. Lisa, I'm gonna unmute you. Lisa, and then Susan will be next.
Thank you. This is so amazing. And it's resonating so strongly. But if you have any advice for how to translate this to parents, and in a situation where we're not getting to like have that like standing at the gate in the morning and yeah, let's talk some more. It's all like, it's like emails. Sometimes I get on the phone with people, but they're in freak out mode. And is my kid going to be ready for next year? And so it's like, the faculty might be on the same page as you, but I'm having a hard time passing that on to parents.
Such a good point. And I actually think that speaks to another big major innovation that I hope will come out of this whole pandemic situation, which is that our schools right now are seen by so many people as so separate from families, you know, and teachers who are really great teachers know that you need to be connected with the family, you need to be connected to the parents, you need to be engaged around that child. But I think, you know, one thing that we could really do is actually be leaders in helping parents and children start to interact more around each other's learning, because and I understand that that's a big ask, because a lot of parents are super freaked out about, like, they've lost their jobs and things like that, right? I get that. But what you can do is a couple things. First, you can try to actually, when you can, right, you can try to actually make these projects things that kids co-create with their parents in a way that the parent could help. So there may be a parent who says, well, yeah, if you can sew these masks and do this with these other kids, then maybe on Saturday morning we can drive them over and drop them off at the Keck School of Medicine or whatever, and this special drop-off they have. Or maybe parents can be more involved in other more direct ways, where there can be interview projects of your family history or things like that, it's a nice time to do that because everybody's home together now. In terms of helping parents who are just freaking out, of course, you can't be in a position, like, you can't be expected to do all that, but here is to be parents' therapists, but here is what I would say you should reassure parents about, and then work to make it true. What kids really don't want to get behind on is not learning schoolwork. It's developing themselves as people. Because like I said at the very beginning, they are learning right now. The question is what, right? And if they're learning, I can't do anything when I don't have anybody telling me what to do. I can't learn anything when somebody else doesn't lay out the work for me and lead me through it thing by thing and explain it to me, right? That's a very, very bad life lesson. But if they're learning, when stuff gets bad, my parents suffer, I suffer, the world suffers, but I can do something about it. What can I do about it myself here that I can at least contribute a little bit? Who could what could I grow myself into right now? What can I do to help? And if you can encourage parents to help their kids feel and think that way as much as you can, right? Then first of all, it's going to help the parents, because when the kids start acting like that, the parents will feel better. They'll see how great their kids are and how great what their kids are capable of, right? And they'll be proud, and it inspires them, right? My kids inspire me all the time. And then also you reassure them that what really matters now is how kids are making meaning of stuff, because the way in which they're thinking and understanding and learning lessons from this whole situation, that is something they will take with them next fall. You can catch up on fractions if it so be, right? You can catch up on how, grammar, or on the nitty-gritty sort of backbone sort of building block skills that you're not being taught well right now potentially. But you can't undo nearly as easily the lesson that when things go bad, I sit back and wait because nothing can be done, right? And as soon as somebody fixes the world for me, I'll be ready to do it again, or makes me, right? That's a lesson you really don't want your kids learning. You want to turn that around. So what I would say is, parents, let go of the traditional goals that you had for your child's academic learning right now, and instead work really hard on their development as a person. Work on them growing skills that are much broader, that are relevant to today's situation. You can't make kids feel like fractions is relevant right now if it isn't, right? That's the reality. But if they start designing a new kind of mask design or something, and all of a sudden they do need to learn, math to do it, then they're going to be on fire to learn it. They might be asking their parents to help them, or their older siblings, or you, right? So what I would say is, help the parents to let go of the aims, the traditional aims we think of being the end of first or second or third grade, and instead think about, what can an 8-year-old think like? How can a 9-year-old be of service to the world, right? What is a 10 or a 15-year-old able to contribute to make the world a better place, and to manage herself in a way that makes her know that she's capable of really being of service to others, and to grow herself even when there's no one there who's making her do it. Those lessons, if we can focus on those, when they come back next fall, they'll be able to catch up. And maybe they'll even be ahead of where they would have been, because though they're behind on the building blocks potentially, A, they may not be, because they've now got a much broader sort of knowledge base in which to bring those different kinds of knowledge, right? And B, even if they are, they know what it's for. They've been out in the world more, like, ironically, because they're stuck at home, but they've been engaged in, like, let me make it happen, right? I need to invent something. What can I do to help the world right now? How about this? How about that? How about something simple? How about I do my garden, the gardening for my elderly neighbor who's afraid to go out? at this time. You know, I put a mask on and I stay away from her front door and I don't touch anything that's, you know what I mean? But I trim her lawn. What would I learn from that, right? That I might not learn in history class. And then I'll bring that back to history class and maybe it'll help me appreciate the Great Depression later better, you know? So kids are learning right now. We need to think about with the parents to letting go of all the milestones that you traditionally tick off and instead thinking, what's my kid capable of being right now? What kind of person is my child capable of growing into right now? How can I help her or him learn lessons around the kind of person she wants to be throughout her life, not just right now? And if we focus parents on that, maybe it will alleviate some of their fear, although I know it's hard to convince parents. I am one, I mean, you know, and maybe it will also help the parents because then their kids will actually ask them to help and get engaged. I mean, there's nothing more sort of heart-stopping in a good way, right? Than when my 15-year-old comes to the dinner table, it's like, oh my God, I invented this thing, and it's, you know, furnace filters combined with cotton stretched over the top are actually approved by the NIH as virus filtering. Would you have believed it? I'm like, I had no idea, right? But he's excited and he's off trying to figure it out because he thinks maybe he and his friends might be able to do something that could actually help the medical community in this time, and they may well, right? If you can put kids in that position and let parents be there with them so they're in it together, it'll help everyone. And I know that that's not your job fully, but that's what I would say. Try to help parents understand that what matters is what their kids are learning right now, not what their kids are, you know, able to do, but what they're able to think like, what story they're telling themselves about what this is. It's an opportunity. Use this as an opportunity to engage interests and engage community service. And whatever it is that you can think of to do that is of interest to you, that uses your talents, whether you play music out the balcony to make your neighbors feel happy at 7 p.m. every night, whatever it is, that's a contribution. You're going to learn to play your instrument better if you do that, right? And all of a sudden you're going to realize what music's for. Yep.
I think we have one more question before
Sure.
you go on. Susan.
Hi, Mary Helen. I wanted to, you know, one of the resources that I think that we might have, and I wanted to get your ideas about this, is the existential questions that we all have right now. And when I was reading your article and thinking, you know, I think of those as different than pure anxiety. I think that those maybe is default mode network kind of activity.
Yeah.
And how can we mine that in terms of kids and everybody really telling their stories about what's happening right now, or you know, just formulating their narratives, and what value is that?
That is such a good question, Susan. And I would say that it depends a lot on the age of the kid, right? Because that's going to look, all kids are worried about death and dying right now, right? And some of them are seeing it, and, you know, more than they would have been, right? And so that's, like you said, both an opportunity and a burden, right? And we need to make sense of it. How do you translate it from a stress to something that feels meaningful and real, which may be sad, but is still empowering, right? You have to make a story out of it. You have to make meaning out of it. So I think you're absolutely right. There are ways that we can, you know, depending on what it is you teach and what it is you know, who your kids are, you can start by having conversations with them about it. I mean, like my daughter's English teacher in, you know, Manhattan Beach Public High School English teachers, like had a whole talk with her students last week about mental illness, because it turns out she you know, struggles with one, and nobody would have known, right? But by having that conversation, she opened up a space for a bunch of 18-year-old seniors to talk about these existential things, right? So if you can, it does put a lot of burden on you, right? As a teacher, you need to really build rapport with your students and make everybody feel safe in these online settings and engage. But if you can design activities or, you know, writing assignments or video assignments, like whatever kids can do, or art or something where they can be explaining it, the way that you help people resolve that kind of existential angst is by helping them conceptualize it. When it's conceptualized, when you have a story around it, then you feel better, right? And you can build stories in so many mediums. You can build stories with words. You can build stories with music. You can build stories with art. You can build stories with just activities like in my daughter's case, yoga, right? You can build stories around what it means to be alive and what it means to be alive now and the social nature of that. But it's an active process. The thing I think we need to realize is you can't resolve somebody's existential angst by just telling them what the answer is, because let's face it, nobody knows what the answer is, right? And so they know that too. They need to come to an understanding. We need to find ways, structured activities if we can, to support them in resolving that angst. And the best way for them to resolve it is to understand it in some way that appeals to them. And that is appropriate for their age level. So if you're talking seniors in high school, they can be examining literature where this is not a new phenomenon. People have talked and written about and explored, these kinds of existential questions in literature all the way through. They can learn to analyze those things and then to write their own opinions as they go. If you're talking about third graders, they can think about what these things mean to them. They could interview their grandparents over Zoom, or they can do, the real essence of it is they need to not pretend like that question doesn't exist. They need to not pretend like we can make you feel better by doing something fun or having cookies, and instead think, no, there's a time to engage with that. And it might be painful, but as long as it feels in control, as long as it feels like something that I can learn to understand, or understand why I don't understand it and be okay with that, which is also hard, right? All of us deal with that. Then it's not a burden anymore, right? You have to resolve it for yourself, but that takes work. So I don't know if I've given you a thorough answer, Susan, but the idea is that depending on who the kids are, how old they are, they need to have ample opportunities to express and engage with these ideas and not sweep them under the rug and pretend like they don't exist, because that's when you get the really bad dark side of default mode network activity, which is rumination and depression and withdrawal, right? And we're seeing a lot of that, especially in teenagers right now, but also in young children. 4, 5, 6-year-olds are really acting out and withdrawing in these weird cycles. I don't know if any of you have 4-year-olds, but I know several of them who are doing that. And they need to find a way to engage with it and to act on it. And acting makes you feel better, and you dig in, and then you make sense out of it. And when you can explain it, even if what you realize and come to is incredibly horrible and sad and tragic, the process of explaining and representing to other people in a piece of art or in a really well done poem or something feels cathartic. And so that's what I would say. I think engage kids with it.
Mary Helen, just a time check here. I know we have about 20 minutes left. I know many people are very interested in seeing the brain.
Okay, so I can take you into, I can always go into the brain. I'm always happy to do that. So let's go back to it then. Would you like me to, I'll show you this little Nova clip that is about the work that we've done with teenagers. So the kids in this study are actually the ones who are written about in the Ed Leadership paper, in the neural part, not in the education part. And so it shows my lab, it shows how we talk to kids about what they believe and think. And what the big picture finding is, which you would take away from that leadership paper, is it's the way that kids make meaning out of things that determines, is pushing how their brain develops over time. And that in turn is what's associated with feeling good about yourself, having a values-based identity as an adult, feeling like answering questions like, I know who I am, I know what I believe in, I feel like my life is going well, I have a purpose in my life, I enjoy my relationships, and I like myself, right? The people who are saying that are the kids who at age 14 and 15 are explaining things in these ways that show that they are driven to try to make sense out of stuff. not just what happens here and now, but the big picture of what it all means in a cycle or in a bigger sphere of influence than just this here and now kind of action. And helping kids engage in making that kind of bigger picture story seems to really grow them as people neurologically as well as psychologically. Those are the big findings that come out here. And they're so relevant now, because even though the meaning that the kids are making is different, our data suggests that it's the way kids make sense of what's going on now that's going to determine how it affects them, not what happens to them, right? So I'm going to play this video for you. It's just a couple minutes long, and it shows you the kids and a little bit about the experiment paradigm and our fMRI scanner, and then we can talk about the findings. Okay, so you're going to give me thumbs up when this works. Okay.
The sound is not working now.
Oh, I didn't do anything. Did it work at the beginning?
No, I know
it's I got a thumbs up. Okay.
when we were testing it, but it's not working.
I didn't do anything different. Do you want to play it from your side, Erin?
Kathy, do you?
Kathy, rather?
I think Kathy has it.
Let's see. My sound is all the way up. You tell me if it's playing or what's going on.
It looks like it's paused right now.
You may
Okay,
need
so
to
mine-
change the output under mute. You may need to mess with those settings.
Mess with the settings. Okay, it worked before. Okay, let's see. Mess with the settings. Okay, mute. I'm going to look at my mute and, oh, select a microphone. Audio settings.
It might be related to the share screen on that setting, like it is on Teams. You have to go to the up screen arrow, and then there's a share audio. I don't know if it's...
Okay, mute my microphone, enable stereo sound. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay, so I'm in the audio. Okay, wait here. I don't know why it's not. speaking.
Mary Helen, Kathy has it ready to go. So
Oh,
let's
good. Go ahead, Kathy.
share your
Sorry, we tried it before and it worked, so.
screen. So Kathy's also is not doing the sound.
All right. Okay, well, I'll talk you through it. I can see what you're watching.
Maybe try
play-
select same as system. Maybe try select same as system under speaker. Select a speaker.
Okay, select the speaker. Okay,
Try
otherwise
that. I've
move ahead with other stuff.
Yeah, I wonder if we want to move ahead.
Yeah. All right. Well, here we go. I will talk. I'll walk you through it. Oh, now I'm not sharing my screen anymore, am I? Okay. Okay. Hold on one second. Okay. Let me just. Okay. Okay, there we go. So I'll just go ahead. I'm going to just play it without sound and narrate really quickly so you can see. So let's see, I'm going to scooch ahead. Okay, so what we basically do is we have kids come to the Brain and Creativity Institute and we talk to them. I just interview them about what they think about things. And this young woman here is talking about the story of Malala in Pakistan. Well, we don't use her name, but we just say, here's a girl who got shot in the head by the Taliban, and here's her talking, and you see Malala at age 12 being like, they can't stop me, right? I'm gonna go to school here, there, or anywhere. And I ask her, how does that story make you feel, right? And then she talks about it. And she talks about how, so this is her watching some video footage of the story, and then she talks about how it makes her feel. And I write some notes just so I don't stare at her, right? So she feels like she can think freely. And she says, I'm going to get my education here, there, or anywhere. And then, you know, she kind of breaks down. And then the girl watching is like, wow, it makes me realize how much my right to go to school shouldn't be taken for granted and all these kinds of things, right? So you start to learn from the social world. And as she makes that kind of meaning, then we move them into the scanner. So I'll just show you it so you can see what it looks like. Here we go. So she, oh wait, I'm gonna go ahead a little bit. This is me blathering about something. Okay, so there's the scanner, and she gets in and we slide her inside and we can take pictures of her brain while we're measuring what's going on her body physiologically, like through like microscopic sweating on the bottoms of her feet and stuff, and also what's happening in her brain as she watches the same stories again. And then what we can do is look at how the ways in which kids talk are related to how their brains activate when they're experiencing the same emotions in the scanner. We can look at individual differences in what kids do. And then we can bring them back 2 years later and then 5 years later and do it again and talk to them some more and then see how their brains have changed and how they're doing as young adults. So the basic idea that we discovered first is that, and this was with adults, not with kids when we discovered this, is that, you know, feeling emotions is so powerful psychologically and biologically. It's so related to health, it's so related to well-being, it's so related to your ability to think and learn, because it's involving brain systems that are the same ones that keep you alive and conscious. So it's not a separate thing where your body's going along and your brain's going along, living like it should, and then along comes emotion and messes with it or just goes on top of it, right? Your very survival related mechanisms all the way below the level of conscious awareness in your brain stem, which I can show you in a minute, are actually activating and engaged in creating that emotional response. What that means is that these things run very, very deep. They run very deep into our bodies, into our health, into our brains, and hence into the ways in which we think, right? And that's why you can be an adult woman who suddenly has her first panic attack and thinks that she can't breathe, but actually because she's got COVID, but then realizes, no, I'm just freaking out because I'm upset, right? That overlaying of social meaning making, I'm upset, these people's businesses are failing and it's a tragedy, right? On top of the biological sort of gut level activation and reactivation of systems that control your digestion, your breathing, your heart rate, right? Your consciousness, how awake you are. All of that is really intertwined in our biology. And that's why the way we feel is such an important predictor of how our brains develop. Because it's the way in which we experience and have emotions happening that is actually using our brains in different ways. And as we use them, they change to fit that pattern. It's kind of like when you learn to play soccer, right? If you're running down the field, your legs get stronger, right? Your legs get stronger over time because you're using them to do the same things over time. And then after a while, they get good at it, right? Because they build up capacity. It's the same thing with emotions. Emotions are building up your capacity to think. The question is about what and in what way. And that's why chronic anxiety is so detrimental, is because you build a capacity to be very reactive. And you don't really want to be that reactive all the time. It's very hard to let that go once you've built up that ability to do that. All right, so if we look at the brain, as you can see, the brain, what we find is that emotions literally activate the same brain systems that keep you alive. And even when the emotions are not about you, they're about other people, right? That's how deeply social we are. We can see somebody else get shot in the head and feel like, you know, good for her, she can beat the Taliban. And we ourselves impact our own consciousness and the way our guts are felt in our brain, right? Think about how remote that is. That's what we need to capitalize in this COVID era, right? Because we are so deeply empathic as a species, and it's so much more natural for us to be that way in close proximity, but we can do it remotely too. And we need to do it, but it takes more work, right? It takes more work. So here's what happens in the brain when people are experiencing emotion overall on average. When people say, I feel really strongly right now, and there's a bunch of really interesting things going on in these data. So the orange spots are the places in the brain that are more activated. They're getting more blood flow when people say they feel really moved by something than when they say, you know, I don't think it's that compelling or that interesting. You know, I thought about it, but it's not that meaningful to me, right? I don't feel that moved by it. And unbeknownst to them, there are all kinds of stories mixed in that are not meant to be so compelling so that we can show the difference, right? And what do we have? First of all, if you look, you can see my cursor, right? This is the person's nose. We're slicing right through the middle of someone's head, right? And here's the tongue. And this is down here, their brainstem. But brainstem, this is their spinal cord, right? This is already into your body. And if you look in between the spinal cord and the rest of your brain up here is this kind of bottleneck structure that is intermediating. And it's literally densely packed with tiny little nuclei that we don't even fully understand, right? That are passing signals from the brain to the body, from the body to the brain, back and forth. And these regions in here, you cannot live without. Because your brain can't control your body. It can't make you breathe. It can't make your heart beat, you know? So without brain down here, you're dead, okay? So the brainstem in the middle is actually that intermediary. And these regions up in here are deeply engaged in maintaining consciousness. If you get damage in here, it's called the mesencephalon. If you get damage in here, you literally get a persistent vegetative state, coma, right? Or death, depending on how extensive the damage is. So this is like literal. And all the way down to here, this is the medulla. This is the bottom of field of view in the scanner right there. The medulla, we can't even keep you alive on life support if you get damage there, because it's right in between, it's the like little bottleneck between your spinal cord and the rest of your central nervous system. This place is essential for survival. And look at how it's activated when people say they feel emotions that have moral or ethical connotations and that are deeply meaningful to them about other people's situations, right? We literally engage our own survival related mechanisms in a different way when we feel moved by somebody else's situation. And this is the kind of thing that makes learning really meaningful. When you can really get engaged, this is why motivating, self-relevant stuff that feels like you're actually engaging with other people and helping them and solving problems is so powerful, not just psychologically, but also in terms of your physical health. People who have a sense of purpose in their life live longer across the ages. They're more likely to, or less likely to die at any age than people who feel like, you know, it's not up to me kind of thing, right? I don't really have a reason for being here. I'm just going along. And what we really don't want, all those parents who are worried about whether their kids are going to be behind on, you know, fractions, is that their kids learn the lesson that I'm not powerful. I don't have a purpose. I have to wait for the world to come to me. And then over here, we've got two sort of mirrored places on either side of the front of the head underneath called the insula, because they're kind of insulated underneath. And here's another picture of them from the, you know, the Grey's Anatomy, the textbook, right? Not the TV show. In here, up in these three gyri right there, right? I don't know if you know this, but these folds all over the brain called gyri are actually, you know, quite similar across people. It's like faces, right? They look different. You can tell different people's faces are not exactly the same, but everybody's got eyes, eyebrows, nose, mouth. Brain is like that too. And you got these three little gyri right there, right? That are called the anterior insula, the front part of the insula, and they're massively activated here. What do those parts do? We've known since the 1950s in neurosurgeries that when you poke around in there, the person vomits, right? They get nauseous, they get other kinds of gastromotoric responses, right? Which I won't describe in polite company. What do we know that these regions are doing? When you're experiencing emotion, you are actually playing it out on the same brain systems that feel your guts and digest your food, right? That's why when we get butterflies in our stomach, we interpret that as nervousness, or when we are worried, we get stomach aches. These things are tied together. And it's another reason why during this era of isolation and fear and anxiety, we need to diffuse that by turning it into action. Because when you engage in action, you instead engage networks that are like, they feel like you're doing something for a reason rather than feel like you're internally focused and nervous, right? So you wanna help people turn that around. And then I can see we just have a few minutes. So I'll just allude to the next big finding here, which is this thing, I put a question mark over it because we call it the default mode network because it's not really got a great name. But what we know about these regions is that they only activate when you're not engaged in sort of watching things happen here and now, like moving your pencil on the paper. They're kind of the sort of ruminative, deep thinking kind of regions where you make connections, you call up memories, you imagine possible futures, you think about the ethical implications of things. It's basically for thinking about things that aren't in the here and now. And so what you want is a balance. And what we show in the teenagers is that kids who are moving between these two modes, this kind of out, feeling, engaging, empathic, acting, and then this reflecting, letting it down and sort of calmly turning inward to make sense out of things, but not ruminating there, instead moving it and turning it back into action. It's that's associated with healthy patterns of growth over time. So that's what we want to be encouraging in ourselves right now and in our kids right now. How do I take those stories I'm telling myself and turn them into plans and actions and engagement and socially moving with other people, even if I can't do it in the real physical sense? And then how do I then make sense out of that? And it comes all back around. I'm just going to close up so that we have enough time to think about what it all means. But it comes all back around to the idea that we can learn new stories by moving between these modes. When we're stuck with that idea I presented at the very beginning, where it doesn't make sense to us, we don't know what the existential meaning of all this is, we don't know how to be ourselves in this COVID world, we don't know what can I do to help, or what should I be waiting for to happen. That inability to build a story is kind of setting yourself on this anterior insula pivot point. You're like flipping back and forth like a seesaw, and it feels very anxiety provoking and unsettling. What we need to do is unify these together to help ourselves construct stories around what it means. When we do that, we've moved into and restored the balance between these default and inner regions and these active outer regions. And so just to kind of tie that all back together, in your own teaching now during these terrible, hard times, I would focus on that. How do you help young people and yourselves, you're human beings too, right? How do you help young people and yourselves and young people's parents learn the value and practice having opportunities to engage with actions, which is so difficult now, but that can be done, that are driven by interests and meaning and possible futures, right? And that's the internal world. And when you connect that internal storytelling narrative with external action that feels productive, that's where you get well-being. It's in moving the seesaw back and forth in this regulated, organized way that feels agentic, rather than being stuck ruminating or being stuck in the anxious, like fast-paced reacting. It's being able to tie those together to do meaningful, future-oriented, socially and morally situated, culturally appropriate action and agency in the outside world. And when we put those together in projects for kids, give them a chance to think about what they're interested in, and then to build it, and then to think about what they accomplished, and then to present it, right? As they're moving back and forth like that through conversations and through sharing with other kids and through teaching other kids potentially, and through learning how to learn themselves in this more independent way, that's where we're actually going to restore a new kind of balance that I think, if there's anything that's good that comes out of this pandemic, that will be one of the things, is that kids and families and teachers are sort of being forced to rethink how much of the work is out here and how much of the work is in here, and how do we design work that actually is about setting up a pivot and letting people move. So with that, I'm gonna be willing to take any last couple of questions. I'll put up an ending slide here. You all know there's a book you can get if you want. There's also this freely available brain basis for integrated social, emotional, and academic development that's online. You can, I don't know how you take a picture of this with a cell phone on a screen, but you can just search. It's on the Aspen Institute. And it talks about the developmental sort of situatedness of these different stages of doing this, and what that might mean for teachers. It doesn't talk about COVID because it came out in 2018, but you can extrapolate and figure out, well, what would it mean here? if I was to really focus on kids' development and let's just forget for now about their learning, because the learning will follow, but focus on what's the development that's leading them to these big lessons of patterns of believing in yourself, patterns of believing in the world, and of acting agentically, and of not waiting for the world to fix itself, but of being a compassionate, active agent in the world, even under these difficult times. So thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing in these incredibly difficult circumstances. Let's turn it into an opportunity that will actually, you know, help us to innovate in a way that will be useful in the future.
So on behalf of the CATDC, I want to thank you, Dr. Immordino-Yang, for being with us today. I want to thank you for sharing all of your research and your insight with us as we go back to our classrooms and really try and impact our students. And I want to thank all of you participants for joining us on this Friday afternoon. I want to encourage you to check out our website. We have a lot of upcoming programs, including one on Monday, which is an SEL workshop with Dave Mokel that's free for member schools. So really want to encourage you to look at that, as well as our summer institutes. And we will be sending out the article that Dr. Immordino-Yang referred to. We sent it out before, but we'll remind you of it again, as well as the video link to the video that she walked us through today, in case you want to look at that. So thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful weekend.
I should also say that I have a workshop too next July that will be virtual now, that's run by the Learning in the Brain company. So you can always sign up for that if you want more of this. And I should also say that I'm launching a new center at USC called CANDLE, the Center for Affective Neuroscience Development, Learning, and Education. So you can go to our website, candleusc.edu, or follow us on Twitter, and we'll be pushing out resources as they become available. So thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Hi, Susan. I can't hear you.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. I've been in that space of learning how to live with this kind of thing, and the best thing that I did was, in a way, to maybe 2 weeks in, kind of stop trying to learn everything and just try to do me, you know, and go with my instincts, and that was very helpful for me. And yeah, good days, bad days.
All right, that's so good. Well, it's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Good. Okay. So,
Dr. Yang, I just wanted to say thank you
hi,
to
hi.
Erin for bringing you in. Yeah, I'm executive director of the CATDC, and that was marvelous. And just
Oh,
connect
good.
so
I'm so
many of the
glad.
things that we've been thinking about and learning, and your passion and expertise was very, very much appreciated on this Friday afternoon. So thank you.
Good.
Thank you
Well,
for your
thank
work.
you so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
And I know
Erin.
how flexible you were being even during the workshop. I
Mhm.
really recognize that. Thank you. Thanks
Oh,
for
you're welcome. Yeah.
trying to make it relevant.
Yeah. Well, if there's anything that this pandemic teaches you, it's you got to be flexible.
Absolutely. That is true.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thanks
Okay.
again.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
for
Bye,
everything.
everyone.
Thank you.